early March, the White Army attacked an army garrison in the city of Nasir in the Upper Nile state. The White Army was once affiliated with the SPLM, an army group that was or is led by the first Vice President, His Excellency Riek Machar. And upon that particular attack, the President of the Republic of South Sudan, the youngest country on the continent, went ahead and put the president under house arrest. But also we saw the UPDF being deployed in South Sudan on a peacekeeping mission as it was stipulated. So joining me to discuss this very interesting conversation is a panel of, today I think it is just not distinguished, but they're all powerful people and they'll help us put perspective to the conversation. So tonight we're talking about the deployment of the UPDF in South Sudan and the implications it has on the East African community relationship. So in no particular order, I'll just introduce my guest and we get right into the conversation. From my immediate right-hand side, I'm joined by Ginyera George. Ginyera George is a student of law, final year student of law at Makerere University. Very happy to have you here.
Thank you very much, Greg.
Right next to Mr. George Ginyera, we are joined by Ms. Ayebare Denise. She is a student of law, but also the executive director of a BetterLife International organization. You're most welcome, and I'm very happy to have you here.
Thank you, Dre.
It's just that today we're not talking about climate, but an issue of transitional justice, but peace and security, which you're also very familiar with and quite outspoken on as well. Very happy to have you here. Right next to Denise is a gentleman who is very articulate on issues of course, security, peace, and democracy. It is Mr. Kwesiga Emmanuel. We're very happy to have you here. He's a final year student of law at Uganda Christian University. Happy to have you here.
Glad to be here.
Yeah. Last but not least is a gentleman in a very neat suit. You've seen him before. Every time he comes on the show, it's just a different suit. New hair, new hairstyle, and always puts very interesting perspective to the conversation. Mr. Isaac Rugambwa. Usually, I refer to him as Prince H. Isaac, very happy to have you here, a lawyer and an industrialist, and once a student of law at Uganda Christian University. Very happy to have you here.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, as I said, in no particular order, let me start with you, Kwesiga. Understanding the situation in South Sudan. As I earlier on told you, in early March, we saw the White Army, which is was once a member of the SPLM, that was a group that supported Riek Machar in the civil war between the years 2013 to 2018, before the peace accord that later on the current president and the current first vice president entered in, that saw the two parties end the war and work together. The White Army was part of the SPLM. And as you said, earlier this month, they attacked a garrison in Nasir in the Upper Nile state. And that later on saw President Salva Kiir put President Riek Machar under house arrest because he says that those particular actions was threatening the sovereignty of his governance and his leadership in the Republic of South Sudan. So from that context, I would just like you to give us a historical background to this conversation. For the viewers who are watching or hearing about this conflict for the first time, would love to understand, and where exactly does the Ugandan army deployment come into play?
Thank you so much, Drake. Once again, I'm very delighted and excited to be here. To you, my fellow panelists, it's nice, and I'm glad to have you on this show. The Wanyankore have a proverb that tibinkwetseho akendera bimkwetseho.
Kindly translate for us.
Meaning that one who thought he was never concerned was at the end concerned. And the Baganda say that omurirano gwocha bit, that happens in the neighborhood does affect you too. What am I saying? That the matter we are discussing is a South Sudan issue, but in actual sense, it's a Ugandan issue, it's an East African issue. And so it's worth our discussion, ladies and gentlemen. Like you did state from the onset that South Sudan is the youngest in East Africa. We saw it being split from Sudan, that is, I think, 2011, and then we see a conflict happening later on, I think after about 2 years, and that is 2013, up to around 2018. After that, we see a peace agreement where some of the countries in East Africa were involved. And then we see some sort of a ceasefire, so to say. We see relative peace coming through. Of course, with the intervention of various countries and, the peace agreements that did happen in 2018. And so from then, we've had, in as much as there has been a Cold War kind of relationship between Riek Machar and the president, Salva Kiir, that is the Dinka against the Nuer. As time goes by today, we see a conflict beginning to happen once again. And that brings us to a point of the deployment of our Ugandan forces. That is part of our discussion today. And so later on in the discussion, we'll be diving into that. But important to note is that the matter at hand today is very complex, and indeed it has so far had repercussions, very absurd repercussions that we wouldn't want or wish to see it happening anytime. It shouldn't really have to proceed, because looking at statistics, about 400,000 people have so far lost their lives in this conflict in South Sudan, and about 4 million people have been displaced, meaning some are internally displaced and others have run for their lives in the neighboring countries, including our own Uganda. For now, I beg to to stop at that very point.
All right, thank you. That's a very, very, very good historical context to where we are today, which now brings us to the issue at hand, which is deployment of the UPDF in South Sudan. Denise Ayebare, Articles 208 of the Constitution of the Republic of Uganda establishes the Uganda People's Defense Forces. And under Article 210, paragraph D, provides that Parliament will have the powers to regulate the actions or even issues relating to deployment of UPDF. Now, what we see is the UPDF being sent into South Sudan without consent of the Parliament of Uganda. But retrospectively, they come back to just sort of seek for permission to deploy the UPDF. Yet the law provides that you need to first seek permission from Parliament and then go ahead and deploy UPDF officials. But that aside, so my first question to you will relate to the issue of legality of the deployment. But then secondly, war is always an expensive venture. And we are a country that is heavily indebted. That means we are running on a deficit budget. We have a very huge young population that are largely unemployed. We have issues relating to maternal health on a rise. We have issues of people dying because of malaria, and yet we still have resources to spend when, of course, Kwesiga said the matters of issues in South Sudan concern us. But at this point in time, as you answer the question of legality and the expense that we are spending now in this war, is it something that we should even involve ourselves in the first place anyway?
All right, thank you so much, Drake. Over time, we have thought that the NRM's foreign policy is one that enables it to stay in power for long. Actually, for starters, we have thought that Pan-Africanism is something that we should embrace, and over time it has gained support from within the country itself. But when you look at it over time, in 2014, by then, the Cabinet Secretary of East African Affairs, the Kenyan lady, she's called Phyllis Kandi, stated that the Ugandan involvement within South Sudan was a political move not supported by the East African community. And that was 2014. Contrary to military involvement, even the East African community says that you should have humanitarian support as compared to military involvement, direct military involvement, like what the UPDF is saying. So only from her statement on how it sounds political, it was a political move not supported by the East African community. Still, I think it's still a political move because you see, the NRM has thrived on having a successful foreign policy. When you look at the likes of South Sudan, DRC, Somalia, but I think right now you can see...
On that point, do we really have a successful foreign policy per se? Because we have been in Somalia. Is there national cohesion in Somalia?
We are Pan-Africanists.
We have been in Central African Republic, we have been in Chad, we have been in the Democratic Republic of Congo.
We have been in Guinea-Bissau.
And it seems there is still no issue of national cohesion, and yet we claim we are successful. So then...
Well, optics, when you look at it, it seems like Uganda is doing a lot. As for us who know what's happening on the continent, know that the global images you're trying to paint it, NRM is Pan-Africanist, we're trying to solve a number of conflicts within the continent, but we actually know what is happening. So most of the times we have used that foreign policy to cover the domestic failures of what exists in the country. And I think anyone you talk to, they're going to say, oh, we like President Museveni of Uganda. Why? And they're likely going to tell you, oh, he has intervened in very many conflicts. He's a Pan-Africanist. But that's an agenda to elude every domestic failure that he actually has committed. And now talking about that, the deployment. Drake, it's very problematic for you to ask me the legality of UPDF's deployment, yet we had a scandal between the court martial and the court of law. I think it's very problematic coming from that. I don't think we have a functioning legislature body that is happening within the country. I think the three arms of what we learned, executive, the legislature, the judiciary, all those are not functioning right now in the country. You likely have only the executive acting and the one that is making decrees and decisions of whatsoever is happening. But I think then, when coming to your second question, when you talk about we have very many problems, they deployed the UPDF and then they came to the parliament to pass a budget for the UPDF to be able to use it. And no one has allowed any of these interventions. And this is during that time.
Just for guidance, when they brought this issue on the floor of parliament, and someone raised an issue of concern, the Speaker of Parliament said that's an issue of security. We are not going to debate on that. And that's what happened. And the issue was closed. And yet, the issue being brought to Parliament has a budgetary implication. That means resources meant to be allocated on issues that are of national importance are diverted for the mission in South Sudan.
Exactly. And you see, Kwesiga said that the problems that are within South Sudan directly affect us. And you see, Uganda's involvement comes from far, far too long. Even when we had Joseph Kony and they claimed that, you know what, he was getting support from the Khartoum government by then. And then compared to its proxy, the Sudanese People's Liberation Army, SPLA. And it has come on 2014, even in 2024, where they claimed that Kenji, is it the Kenji County? That is just at the border where they had the border issues previously in 2024, and they said this is a direct attack on our territory and all those things. I think we don't know where to place our priorities. We're at a time where the health, the Ministry of Health is looking for money to replace for the USAID funding that has been closed off. You have HIV increasing, you have tuberculosis, you have malnutrition, and all these have been foreign funded. But you know what? Our priority is likely to send the UPDF to deploy it within South Sudan. And I think this is where our priorities as a country really go wrong, and we do not know what exactly we want to do.
Interesting. Isaac, looking at the issue, just from the argument that Denise has brought, I just want to focus on the abuse of UPDF. Yeah. Let me just give you a brief context. In some years back, when we have seen the UPDF being deployed on missions in Somalia, missions in Chad, among other missions, and more often than not, of course, the idea of peacekeeping is brought there, and the argument that she raises, the idea of Pan-Africanism, we're fighting for the common good. The situation in South Sudan stems between, of course, also a tweet that was made by the current CDF, Major General Muhoozi Kainerugaba, that, of course, we shall, just in a nutshell, it stems that we shall do away with the Nuers and have the Dinkas. He's already sparking conflict, like ethnic conflict between the Dinkas and the Nuers. Of course, we know the Dinka is being, the president is a Dinka, that is His Excellency Salva Kiir, and the first vice president, His Excellency Riek Machar, is a Nuer. Now you have the whole head of the army saying we shall do away with the Nuers. So that means it's already picking a side. Yeah, the UPDF is, of course, they claim they're going on a peacekeeping mission. Now you're picking a side in a war that you're entirely not supposed to go there and intervene in any issue. Arguments have been raised that the UPDF should have possibly sought support within East Africa and gone, let's say, as an umbrella, more like a multilateral agreement between the peacekeeping armpits of, let's say, Kenya, Rwanda, among others, to go and be in the middle. But right now, we see an army taking a side. My question to you now stems down to the unit of the Uganda Police, of the Uganda People's Defense Forces. which is the UPDF, provided for in our constitution. People have been arguing that this government runs everything like a personal or home affair. The army has been greatly personalized. You deploy the army without consulting the parliament, and just as a way of formality, just come back to inform the parliament. And parliament has no argument about it, passes a budget and goes ahead. On the issue of abuse of the UPDF and the issue of legality, because it looks like we are going against almost every principle of international law. Take us away from that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The question you ask is pertinent to this discussion, though of course previous speakers have tried to shed light on it. The legality question basically at the end of the day drives into justification. But before I head into the justification, contextualizing why the conflict today in Sudan is, or the situation is as it is, you will remember that Sudan created its own problems, yeah, right away from the Cairo Agreement 1954, and then the Addis Ababa Agreement 1978, discovery of oil, and then the separation of the Khartoum government and the North. The first question, the first conflict question came with as a religious conflict. So primarily, the foundation was that Sudan was governed by the British Egyptian governments, but then it was on two lines, the Arab North and the Christian South. And that colonial division, by the time they sought to harmonize the two countries in 1946, before they merged into the two countries, it's where the conflict started from. The fact that the Arab North was already dominated, and then now they were trying to harmonize it with the South Sudan South, the southern part, raised tensions. And these tensions have continued. So the first is the colonial question. The second is the religious question. Now, from 1978, when oil is discovered.
There is also a question of racism.
Yes, from 1978, when oil is discovered, until 2005, what was governing there, we had the Addis Ababa Agreement and the Machakos Protocols that tried to see how peace can be restored, how borders can be shared, and resources reallocated. Now, 2011 January, when the referendum is cast, and 2011 98.8% South Sudan voting to be independent. We have now South Sudan as an independent country. It is recognized now under international law. And Museveni is actually vocal about it, which was okay.
He's always vocal about this.
Yes. Now, from 2011, South Sudan detaches itself indirectly from the previous or the first two sources of conflict, which is the colonial question and the religious question. Now it starts fighting against itself, where we have the vice president and the president on the ethnical line. So it ceases now to be a question of the past. It is a question of the present and how we approach it. From 2011 until now, Sudan has had a long, it's sort of like a third civil war, if I might term it. Yeah. From 2013 to 2018, we have seen how destabilized that the country has been. But where does Uganda come in? Between 2005 and 2017, we had regional, South Sudan is one of the greatest, is one of the leading importers of Uganda's goods, to a tune of around $900 million between 2005 to 2017. Now, between 2017 to 2023, it's about 1.5 billion. We have over 35,000 Ugandans employed in South Sudan. We have a railway station that is linking South Sudan and Uganda currently underway. We have a state-of-the-art market in South Sudan. That shows you how deep Uganda is with South Sudan. Yeah, one might argue that before even tackling the legality question, we might argue from the humanitarian aspect that we have Ugandan citizens in South Sudan who need Ugandan protection. It is unfortunate that with this current conflict, we have already lost 21 lives, but also we can say that what if we did not have a peacekeeping body? What if the UPDF was not there? Would the situation have been better or worse? that's a question maybe
No.
you can
No,
you can.
Okay.
No,
that's
I
also-
think let him, other than pushing it to us as a rhetorical question, it is important that we can be able to respond having heard from his line of argument.
Okay.
May I know what your answer to your question is?
Okay, so it was unfortunate that, of course, Parliament was not respected or consulted before the deployment, that we can't shun away from it. It was also unfortunate that we are trying to push for a unified East African bloc, but then we are still taking independent decisions in terms of peacekeeping, which is the same thing that happened in DRC and the same thing that has been happening over and again. I see you're burning, Mr. Moderator, and you can't wait to.
Denise, let Denise go first.
I think there is a problem with students who have been inspired by Museveni's rhetorical brotherhood. Yeah, I mean the rationale. We could agree with Kada. We could agree with him and say that, you see, yeah, you've been inspired by probably the president's rhetorical brotherhood of Pan-Africanism. But then now the question becomes that UPDF is being viewed not as a peacekeeping force, but rather as neo-imperialist. Because when you look at the skepticism that has been created on deployment, which the government of Salva Kiir actually denies.
Oh, by the way, just to reinforce your argument, Ethiopia is against the idea of Uganda deploying in South Sudan. Now, where does that leave the issue of regional security? A question that I think George will respond to when it comes on.
No, just to conclude, you see, he's trying to say that the UPDF actually is acting as a savior of probably stability, which could inherently protect the East African community bloc. But I think rather this sort of goes against the protection of the East African community bloc, because you have questions like, where is Uganda getting the money to actually fund UPDF? Why is Uganda amidst this skepticism where they're going to deny any know of the deployment of the UPDF forces? But then thirdly, where does this leave or the humanitarian crisis that actually Uganda is creating? Because I think several reports have shown that even from the Lord Resistance Army during that time, the extrajudicial killings that the UPDF was carrying out, the entire torture and everything of the South Sudanese civilians, where you likely have 1 million displaced by 2025 right now in other East African community countries. And so we can't necessarily say that where would South Sudan, it could probably be better, I think so also.
Anyway, I think as you conclude on your argument, my submission would be, these are challenges that we experience with emerging states. Now, the issues that you raise, it's true that before South Sudan broke off from Sudan, there were primary issues or concerns relating to religion and colonialism. Now, there are also other secondary issues. Those two could be the primary issues. Now, the secondary issues were, one, those ethnic those ethnic tensions, which later on, when Sudan broke off in 2011, it went ahead and moved from secondary to a primary issue because South Sudan was now a state. Now, the issue of intervention of Uganda on the issue of South Sudan, where does that leave us as a country, first of all, in terms of the international scene? This creates an idea, or it creates a card about, of course, a negative idea about Uganda and its interference in a sovereign state. But also, it could lead to a possibility shortfall of us being sued again in the International Court of Justice, because allegations are that that our army has bombed indiscriminately a village and killed civilians.
Maybe Onen, I had an inquiry brief for 1 second.
Yeah.
Only a question to all the panelists, because I've heard everyone talking.
Yeah.
Are we arguing on as if we're arguing on the basis that the UPDF army went there without invitation?
We're going to get to that, but let me first finish.
So the atrocities that have been committed by the UPDF in South Sudan, I will not argue that they are necessary, and I will not argue it against the humanitarian question, but I am looking at the lives of Ugandans in South Sudan amidst this conflict. And I'm also looking at the fact that South Sudan has enjoyed a bilateral relation, a strong bilateral relation in terms of trade and commerce with Uganda. And this is why Uganda is quick to intervene in such conflicts, because in as much as my parents urges and says that maybe the situation could have been better, we wouldn't have gone there if the situation was better.
Definitely.
You know.
Anyway, but I think if you look at it from this angle of a possibility of escalation of conflict, because you already have a state intervening on personal matters of a state, of course, the issue of invitation comes in. You are invited by
The sitting president.
the sitting president. The sitting president who went ahead because in his mind, when the city of Nasir was attacked by the White Army, remember the White Army is a rebel group within South Sudan.
Yes.
Now, a rebel group that broke away from a group that was led by the first vice president, that is Riek Machar. Now, in the mind of the president, he assumes that this is an issue caused by the first vice president, that is Riek Machar. That is something we need to draw very clearly. This is a rebel group not governed by any of these people in power.
But predominantly of the Nuer people. I
True.
think it's only right. If I would also make the same presumption. Surely.
No,
We shouldn't be too unfair.
as you make your argument, my question to you would then be, does the deployment of UPDF therefore, would it even in any instance improve the regional security? Because it's actually going to worsen it.
I think having the benefit of listening from all the three panelists, I've sat here surely trying to giggle around whatever they have said, and I think it's something quite candid. But I think I'll better relate to what Isaac has mentioned, because there's a lot to lose if we don't intervene. I was in Kirandongo 2 weeks back. There's been, for context, yes, I was in Kirandongo 2 weeks back. The OPM office in Kirandongo, the OPM office in charge of refugees, called out for a new rollout of approximately 100 new registration volunteers. These are people that work in the settlements in Kirandongo, in Yumbe, Bidibidi, in Ajumani, Pekele, and all those other settlements in the north. So they called for a new recruitment of registration volunteers because of the new influx of refugees in Uganda coming from South Sudan. So I think to say the conflict has not yet escalated would be unfair, because the numbers do show that the conflict has escalated. Secondly, and what I wanted us to buttress and think about very profoundly, is that the UPDF is not in South Sudan just because. It's there on invitation, an invitation that was written single-handedly by the president, the sitting president. The White Army that you talk about is a rebel outfit, yes. And I think it would be very ironic of us to come and sit down here, and then for us to come and sit down and say the White Army has no ties to Riek Machar. Sure. I think that would be very unfair.
It's a rebel group that broke off from Riek Machar. And Riek Machar has an association with the White Army.
I think we'll better guidance from the panelists, which will be able to also break down that. But I think there's a lot to lose if the Ugandan army in and of itself, does not intervene in what is going on in South Sudan. Then thirdly, is that about the legality, and I had some colleagues mentioning about the legality. I followed the proceedings in Parliament. I think the Honorable Minister, State Minister for Security, tabled the motion, Jacob Oboth, I think on the 21st, yet the UPDF, on the 20th, sorry, yet the UPDF was deployed on the 11th, when the letter was written. There are very many issues to do. The request was sent on 10th, the deployment was on 11th. I think we wouldn't have known. Quick response. I think we wouldn't have known if at all the good CDF actually didn't mention it on his Twitter in the morning. So actually, I was trying to look for the name. I think it's called Minji Wakwame, Silent Guardian. It was some sort of covert mission, but I think the beans were just spilled out at that point.
That is where the question comes in. Is the Ugandan army now more like a mercenary that can be deployed any day, anytime?
You know, actually, maybe even to buttress what Isaac said. In a minute, because this is not the first time that the UPDF is being deployed without a resolution. Yes. And it also, the first time was actually in 2015, when they were being deployed still to South Sudan. So in this conversation, I think we only have I don't think that's something we should be discussing because it has happened before, actually.
Okay,
I understand the
exactly.
repercussions about the legality.
Exactly. On the issue, we are all here, people who have studied and read the law.
Definitely.
And we know what the Constitution. I know, okay, for a
Definitely.
fact our country doesn't respect the Constitution, but the law is the law, irrespective, because it represents the spirit of the people. Article 208 is very clear about the establishment of the UPDF.
Even the act is clear. The
Yes,
UPDF Act.
and Article 210D says that you need to first consult with what?
Parliament.
Parliament before any deployment. This is not the first time they've done so.
Actually,
We have seen it happen in Somalia. We have seen it happen in Chad. We have seen it happen in DRC. We have seen it happen in South Sudan, not once, but twice. Now, doesn't that bring out the argument of like abuse of UPDF? Because this is an arm that's supposed to be for the people. But it looks like it's a decision made by an individual who personalizes the army for himself. That's the argument.
That is something that I do agree with. And then I wouldn't want to sound like a person who is trying to support illegality. But then I would then agree with Isaac because he makes a very compelling argument, actually. Something very compelling. Because on the one hand, when you look at the conflict that happened from 2013 to 2018, there are over 50,000 Ugandans that were actually gotten back from South Sudan who were there. And right now, there are very many people thriving in South Sudan. So I would think, if at all I were in the same shoes, regardless of all the legalities that are there, I would think I would have actually made the same decision. Then lastly, is that the situation in South Sudan as is. Today, I don't want to, because if I say I read the East African article today, but I was coming to the studios today as I was getting my I saw the headline on the East African newspaper, and they were trying to, because these are things that are actually happening. It's actually a very big issue. Right now, Kenya has a special envoy for South Sudan, who is Raila Odinga. So it's not something we should take lightly. You understand? He was actually even here of recent, I think 2 days back, meeting Museveni at State House, consultation about South Sudan. So, and they make, equally, like Isaac makes, they make a very compelling argument about what is actually going on in South Sudan. Because they are these two people, Riek Machar, Salva Kiir. So what the article tried to say is that the discussion is not actually about the people who are, it's meant to be about these two people, a 73-year-old and a 72-year-old, who have had their squabbles since time immemorial and are trying to run the country down. When Kwesiga gave a very good historical perspective about where all this came from. And maybe lastly also to mention is that during, and also I think why Museveni has had a very strong attachment to South Sudan, possibly because I know they thrived very much with John Garang in their old days at Dar es Salaam. Then now these two junior cadres, when John Garang was at the helm of leadership in South Sudan, these were his two junior cadres. Riek Machar, someone even wouldn't believe that actually at some point these people were this close. So you have this, and when John Garang dies and goes off the face, his most senior or able ally, Salva Kiir, takes the seat. So they have been embroiled in a sort of conflict, unrest that has now been made a face of two ethnic groups, which are the Dinka and the Nuer. And it's something I think we should also interrogate further.
Definitely. Which now brings us to the relationship at the moment, because you definitely agree that at the moment our army more or less is a mercenary that can be deployed at the prerequisite of an individual who makes the decision.
For justifiable reasons. Like
What
is going on? What is going on in South Sudan is unjustifiable.
I'm willing to bite the bullet and say, I'm willing to bite the bullet and say, I don't think the business that is happening in South Sudan is a justification enough for us to deploy UPDF without maybe having it passed without a budget of its own and everything, amidst what is happening in the country. And I don't think we should argue this independent of the context of what Ugandans are going through right now and where we should put our priorities. I think it should be together, and that justification, I am not really willing to buy it when you look. Even I know business has been going on in South Sudan and all the other countries. I don't think if we cut off business in Sudan right now just because they are having a resurgence or a possibility of a resurgence of a civil war, it would directly affect us to that extent.
It would.
No,
Denise,
I'm
it would.
willing to bite the bullet and say that.
From what and he gives very good statistics. You have business of over 1.5 billion. And the discussion must go beyond that. Because I brought in the element of refugees, well knowing that people may complain, because they're actually coming, and this is a cost that may not be looked at in that
George,
way.
And as you said, the able CDF tweeted against against the Nuer. Yeah? Now, that in its own self is already escalating the conflict, which shouldn't have been the case. Because you have a country's army defending an individual, and it more or less would symbolize is defending a tribe. Let her come in, because also Isaac has, Emmanuel has things burning.
You see, we have left out very, very, very pertinent issues, right? And I don't think this alone. You see, the UPDF has been trained by the US, right? And most people, even when they don't want to talk about the external involvement, they have continuously feared. And I think also Riek Machar has talked about it, that the UPDF having strong ties with the US also sort of claims an external involvement within their affairs. And this also speaks to the ES agenda. Like, if you're likely going to have any of this, what external involvement is going to happen? But then the second thing, you see, individuals outside, rationale, okay, having the rationale as compared to having people who are subjective like Ginyera, I think it's very problematic for us to just assume that we do not have any other motives within South Sudan minus business, right? I think it's not fair to assume that. I think there is also another political agenda that is coming in. And when you look at that entire relationship with probably John Garang and Salva Kiir, and during all that time, you might look at it that is one that wants to be continued, the legacy even through the abled CDF. Yeah. So I think it's also really problematic to look at it. Because when you look at IGAD, I think even Raila Odinga, when he was deployed as the envoy, he has continuously asked that we should not have military involvement. All the East African countries have been against the deployment. Even the new member, Somalia, right now is against that deployment. They have continuously asked that if you want to do anything, humanitarian support. We have an open border policy.
Go for a multilateral approach.
Exactly.
Have a peacekeeping of all these
But
countries.
still, that would
together
be
and
military.
No. The East African Community Regional Force, I think
Something.
Yes, it's the EACR, I think P. Like, they continuously ask that should be involved in. And I think Rwanda, Tanzania have continuously said the same. But guess what? UPDF, I think, and Uganda at large does not want to heed to any of those calls. But then also having an open border policy, I think that's already enough for us to show that we care about them. We're taking them in. Really, Ginyera, you've been in Kiriandongo. I directly work in Bidibidi. And you can see the crisis that is really happening there, given
So you want that to
even
continue?
DRS. I wouldn't want it to continue, but it's being escalated. And there is...
By
there
who?
is
Us who have just gone there
yes,
last
because
week?
you're not a peacekeeping. I don't know what peace you're actually keeping in Sudan. There is no peace to keep, South Sudan. And you see the problem then continues that when you have these individuals come in and everything, you're escalating the humanitarian crisis itself in Uganda. Because when you go into those districts, Nebi, Kiriandongo, Yumbe, Ajumani, all those districts, you're going to see the dire need that they are in, even the refugee community that is coming in. Now I'm going to give you a direct example. When these individuals come in Uganda, people believe they have money because they're getting money from IOM, they're being paid. Exactly. And what you used to buy as a kilogram of tomatoes, let's say 1 kg of tomatoes, maybe at 2,500. Shoots to 5,000, and they don't want to care about whether you're Ugandan or whether you are South Sudanese. That is what happens.
But Denise, these are the things the force wants to cure. The force
clearly, you guys are ensuring a resurgency of a civil war. Like, that's what you're doing. Your CDF can't come and say that we are going to clear away the entire tribe, and you expect that is going to keep peace. You can't go without being deployed. And I mean, the president himself is saying he doesn't know about the deployment of any forces. He's denying. And this creates friction within the community itself to an extent that you're calling for a resurgence of a civil war. You're actually worsening every bilateral agreement that exists, the efforts that EAC has put in place, IGAD, or even Raila Odinga as an envoy. I don't know what they were actually discussing.
Yes, Isaac.
Now, we must we must get some things really quite clearly. And I think we must have misquoted the CDF's words. Yeah, from the tweet that I read, he says that they are going to support Riek not Riek, Salva Kiir, the sitting president, and that, of course, is respect for the sovereignty of a state.
Do you want us to
Yeah.
pull
I am
the
No, no, no. Wait.
Wait.
From what I said, from what I've read, because it's also a tweet and it's there.
Denise is going
Now,
to read it for you.
now, from the humanitarian
Legal
question,
ground.
I want to associate myself with her submission, but from the narrow point of view, from the
Can
narrow
I read
point
it
of
before you
view,
continue?
Please,
yeah.
Let me just
Why?
read that.
Why?
Let
Why?
me
Let's
read
hear
the
the
tweet.
tweet.
Why?
Let me
Let's hear
say,
the tweet.
he said SPLA. This is the CDF. You're able CDF members, Kenya Rugambwa. SPLA IO should surrender to me as soon as possible. Otherwise, not even a rat will survive in well country.
In well, you see, we
Do you know
must.
the-
No.
And what
Mr.
happened
Onen.
later on, they attacked
No.
Nasir has it's mostly a Nuer
No, wait.
settlement.
No, we did not choose to attack Nasir because we wanted to attack Nasir or because it's because it's where the problem
You listen to the
is
other one.
coming
Just
from.
a
No,
moment.
wait.
Kada, you
Guys,
listen.
no.
If the Nuel accept that I'm their son, I will stop attacking them. I'm open to talks with the white army.
I thought we
But
are.
it's also unfair, surely, to use that as an authority, considering what has been tweeted in the
Excuse me?
past.
You say.
let's just have it.
You see-
That shouldn't be a position that we should.
Mm.
No, I understand the position that it holds, but
George, let's have the argument from
okay.
Now, and I said I wanted to adopt her submission, but from
narrow perspective.
yes, from the narrow perspective, on grounds of the fact that you recognize that actually people are flowing into the country, and that is Uganda. You see, the other people are saying that these borders, are Kenyan borders open? Are Ethiopian borders open? Are Rwandese borders open? I want to tell you they are not. Once this conflict escalates, it is still us. For me, when I was studying in senior one, that is around 2013, we were already having South Sudanese students with us
Definitely.
up to today. Some of these students have now married and have settled in the country. If you're arguing on terms of on the economic terms, where does this leave the country? If now Uganda says we are not intervening, we have closed the borders, do you know what actually can happen? You see, we have to also consider the fact that all these other countries who are saying that East Africa is open, they have not had a sitting they have called that, and Uganda refused to attend to answer the South Sudan conflict. We have not had that sitting in the EAC. If it was there and Uganda, then Uganda would be at the wrong side. But the fact that there is fire burning in South Sudan and Uganda is responding shouldn't really be a problem.
But
Definitely.
Well, you look at the refugee question that we have, and I know you're a human rights person.
You also work with the refugee project.
You look at what we are having currently, and then again tell me that Uganda is unjustified in trying to go between. In terms of you cannot say it is a bedroom question. When you look at how our government started, we have also been supported. Any other army can be supported in terms of machinery, in terms of training, in terms of strategies. Why? We are trying to have independent nations, and independent nations thrive on strong security. You get? So Uganda having a collaboration with the US, or Egypt having a collaboration with US or whatever, it is because we have these bilateral relationships, and a better country, a better economy thrives on better security.
Thank you. Let me just paint for you a brief context and scenario. We'll use Uganda, then we have Emmanuel and go for a short break. Just imagine if there was an ethnic tension that happened in this country.
We already have it.
No, I'm saying a serious ethnic tension. And we have all these countries that we have sent so-called peacekeeping missions. Somalia, Somalia,
DRC.
Chad, Burundi, DRC.
Rwanda, Burundi, all of them, at the end of the day, say, okay, you know what? There's a serious civil conflict happening in Uganda. Let us send in our soldiers. Okay, this one, let's imagine that CDF also tweets and say, we are here, we are this one, we are protecting Acholi, we are protecting Baganda, we are protecting Do you think we shall have a nation called Uganda?
Yes, we shall have the country called Uganda on just one ground. Why? If other African states united to end the conflict in South Sudan, it will be done
That's
overnight.
the question.
But no one has
United,
come out. Yes.
Multilateral.
Yes, no one has
United.
come out. They're
United,
saying
not
that we can,
bilateral.
but no one has.
Emmanuel, let's just have you and we go.
No one is willing to put off resources to actually end that
But
conflict.
we don't have the resources as a country.
Yes, we don't have, and the little we have, we are trying to share, which is really is not in a bad spirit.
Emmanuel.
It's really heavy. It's so complex. This is one of the days that I've had to keep quiet silently on two grounds. One, because I am convicted to listen. The panel that I am with today is one I revere, and I do not match any of them in terms of intellect and ability to make deliberations.
Yeah, it's fine.
Yes, I am being serious, especially on such a complex matter. And so my contribution today has been, out of my conviction, has been to learn to be like them. And later on, that has been on the point of I had to listen to them. That's why I've not intervened. But later on, the silence had to be one of, I had to weigh and make decisions of whether I should usurp their positions and now teach them. Because honestly, we seem to be divergent on so many issues. Although I know I might not be able to respond all of them because they've really been so many. But the Baganda have a proverb that akama sabiri olonderi ejinja nga kalaba, that a bird that has two eyes, as you pick a stone to hit it, it sees you. What does it communicate? That whatever happens in Uganda is very visible and clear to the rest of the countries. Something important is moral authority. If I were to ask these two intellectuals, Ginyera and this gentleman, the industrialist, I want to ask you, name two countries that our forces have been deployed.
There is DRC, there is Central Africa, there
And
is
you, Ginyera?
Somalia, and now the South
Do we have peace in those countries?
Somaliland has peace.
I only
Somaliland.
Yes.
Not Somalia.
Wait.
And for me, this is the point.
But Kwesiga,
For
that
me,
can't be a yes
this
or no
is
answer.
the point. You know, it is one thing to participate and it is another to deliver. I tell you, if the paper was to be marked out of participation, Uganda would score 100%. Because if it is to come under the guise of being responsive and caring for our brothers, then we do that to the best. But have we delivered? If we have not, we do not have, before I can even go to that, to the regional scope.
Yes.
Here in Uganda, just recently, you had our own forces beating up our own journalists here in the country. And our command structures have disowned our forces, saying this could be under NUP, this could be under so and so. We do not know who that was. Yet these are people in our uniform, our security personnel uniform, holding the government guns. How then can we confirm that now that they've gone that side, for whatever they will commit, be it an offense outside the scope of what is expected to do, will be owned by our own government? As we speak, our own government, part of our taxes are to pay the debt in compensation for what we rooted from Congo.
Individuals looted from Congo.
What are we going to do? Then, do these countries, for example, the people in South Sudan, are they really confident that we have the moral authority to provide the peace they so need? That is one. Two, I do not believe in these forces. I believe in negotiation at this entire scope. Trust, you might laugh because we hold different positions, but if I were to ask you, has this intervention of security forces in the different, over the years, has it really delivered?
Yes, it
If
has.
not, It is one thing.
Yes,
It is one thing to swallow a Panadol or headaches to relieve yourself of the pain. But
It's
for
also
me,
one
that
thing
is
to cure
short-lived.
disease.
But it is another thing to make examination of what illness it is, and then you treat the
Definitely
same.
come
What
with-
we are doing is simply to swallow a painkiller, but we are not curing that disease. First of all, read the atmosphere around the populace in South Sudan. What is the reception mood? Have we really been received? You've seen, if you've been following on the different media platforms, these people are literally against us. That doesn't negate the fact that the government that called us has welcomed us. But if the people, and they are the majority, in as much as the decision is made by the few, and that is the leadership structure, if the people have no trust in us, then there is not much we can deliver. Because then there is not much we can sell to them. Because they do not trust us in the first instance. If they've not received us, there is not much we can deliver in the South Sudan. And so for me, this entire idea of deployment, I am not in support of it. Another point, and very related to that, the Banyankore have a proverb, ngowakiza nyina omwana embabazi aba nayenda kumurya. That if you are more sympathetic to a child more than the mother, you literally want to eat that child. I have a feeling that we might want to eat Sudan the same way we ate DRC Congo. For me, that is my biggest fear. I know, yes, it is a brotherly relation, and you made a narration of the relationship between the previous leaders of the DRC and Sudan and our own government. But I am very curious, what is it that it is Uganda that is quick to react, and why are we the target? For me, I would agree and associate with Onen's statement where he said that we seem to have a mercenary kind of arrangement, that if you need quick military intervention, then we are a call away. But for me, that is never a long-term solution. It is only short-lived. At the end of the day, you might eat South Sudan.
Anyway,
We are already eating.
let's just go for a short break. It's a very heated debate. I know George wants to respond, Isaac wants to respond, but let's just go for a short break. When we come back, we shall talk about the implications of this deployment on the EAC and how we relate with the community states that we have at the moment. Otherwise, stay with us. See you in a few.
Digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create and publish digital media, or to access and use computers, other electronic devices and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, a right to universal and equal digital access, a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others. The state's digital rights are frequently violated through various unfair actions, for example, blockage of websites and social networks, theft of credentials, unauthorized use of people's data for personal gain, privacy intrusion, online censorship, arrests and intimidation of online users, internet blockages, and the proliferation of laws and regulations that undermine the potential of technology to drive social, economic, and political development worldwide. It is hence every citizen's responsibility to respect rights of other digital users and to speak out or report to the responsible parties when one's rights are violated.
Welcome back from that short break. Just before we went into the break, we have had a very heated debate, and I believe we're going to have another heated debate of the second half of the show. But right now, I just want us to take the scene and put it on a broader perspective of Uganda's relationship at the moment with other EAC members. And I'm going to start with you, Denise. You've been quite vocal on the argument relating to Pan-Africanism, and you also associate yourself with that same argument. At the moment, when we deployed in South Sudan, we have seen Ethiopia disagreeing with our stance of deploying UPDF in South Sudan, but also other East African community countries have said the same or raised similar concerns. The argument is we shouldn't have done it individually because we claim that we have a bilateral relationship and intervened in the matters of South Sudan. Rather, they would claim or argue that we should have employed a multilateral approach. Now, as we open up this discussion on the implications this has, the deployment of UPDF in South Sudan, let's just talk, open up the debate on the implications it has on Uganda's relationship with other EAC members.
All right. So thank you, Drake. So you see, first and foremost, the African Union itself, minus even we come to the East African community, or it says that before you have deployment of forces, you must have multilateral supervision. At least maybe the AU or the EAC must be there to see what is happening. And the East African community itself, within its treaty, Article 6, it says that you should not have military involvement because it undermines the East African community regional forces, as you have them happening in DRC. And continuously, you also have the traditional peacekeeping. Kwesiga has mentioned it before, and when you have the traditional peacekeeping, it means that you do not have active combat within that particular country. And defense it means that the only combat you're going to have is likely going to be defense against any of the others. But what you have happening in South Sudan at the moment is that UPDF has actively gone there and is actively carrying out combat. And then besides that, this is not a traditional peacekeeping. And this has happened from 2013, 2025, what happened in Nasir. And as compared to what we would want to keep peace, they said you either give up or you perish. And that's the UPDF statement, really. So it goes against all the UN or the AU or the East African community whatsoever they're supposed to have. But then the second thing on how it undermines stability within the East African community. You see, over time, most of the countries have disagreed with how the UPDF has been deployed, particularly in South Sudan, right? And you see, it undermines efforts that the Intergovernmental Authority on Development, which is the IGAD, has continuously made, because they also have a special envoy to South Sudan, the IGAD itself. You have Raila Odinga being an envoy to South Sudan. So the efforts that are supposed to be there to negotiate, to keep in the entirety of the peace that exists within that country, are undermined by the deployment that is going to exist within that. But then the third thing, see, deployment can only be accepted when you do not have opposition from the citizens, like Kwesiga was saying. Opposition, Riek Machar has continuously said that Ugandan forces should not be deployed there. But then besides that, it has continuously made it difficult because, like, we want to say South Sudanese issues are not just because you're necessarily having a rebel group or anything. They're complex issues that have continuously come up from tribal, from how they operate and all that. And continuously siding with the Dinka, who is the current president, and then leaving out the Nuer, you're going to continuously fuel or escalate that conflict. And this all speaks to the stability of what the East African community looks like. Because first of all, you're undermining the legality of why the East African community exists. But secondly, you're disagreeing with countries like Tanzania, like Rwanda, or even Kenya, because Kenya has come out countless times openly saying that they do not agree with how Uganda is deploying forces within the UPDF. And this has happened from 2014 and 2025 currently, where they're deploying forces. So where does that leave the East African community? It looks like the EAC now becomes a hegemonic structure where that president who wants to act as the father of the East African community can do whatsoever he wants, even against the EAC. So you strain the entire relationship of the different countries and undermine the efforts that they have continuously made in different countries.
Definitely. George, Denise makes a very succinct argument in relation to undermining the legality of EAC when it comes to deployment of UPDF. I believe that is an argument you would want to disassociate yourself from, because your first submissions or your major submissions relied on the idea that, one, you see, the issues of South Sudan is one that we must go ahead and deploy ourselves in. So, on the issue of the implications this deployment has on EAC, what are your thoughts on that? Because I think they would be otherwise.
I think, like you rightly mentioned, even during the break of the show, there was a very hot debate within the break. Yeah. And for some of the things that I mentioned during the break, I think I would still agree with what I mentioned, that even within the EAC, as is right now, the issues of South Sudan affect us mostly. And that is something, I don't know whether there's anyone to agree. I don't know whether the South Sudanese refugees in Rwanda, I don't know whether they're in Tanzania, I don't know whether they're in Kenya. So, and it's the same discussion that we had here sometime. And I remember we were on this very show when we were talking about the EAC integration and how I wholeheartedly disagree with what the establishment of the EAC as is today, where you're getting members, anyone who wants to join should come in. It's like some festive Eid that whenever you get an invitation, it's as easy as that. Just come, let's dine together without looking at some of these things. Even South Sudan just joined like that because the more the merrier. I think that's what we believe in. So I don't want even to look at it as an EAC issue because we are most affected. In all honesty, we are most affected. All the issues in South Sudan, I think in a sense still, we are the biggest benefactors from stability in South Sudan compared to any other party in the region. So first and foremost, I want to distance myself from looking at it in an EAC perspective, regardless of how Kwesiga, I mean, look in Kwesiga's eyes. Because what we have right now, and Kwesiga still gave very good opening remarks that we are South Sudan's neighbors. We are the most affected with instability in South Sudan, and we're the biggest benefactors with stability in South Sudan. So, in that regard, I don't want to discuss it in the EAC perspective, but I'd want, and Kwesiga still, I would agree with Kwesiga that what we have today, Kwesiga during the break he mentioned, I don't know whether that was a position during the break or he can also uphold it in the show itself. He mentioned that he'd want very much to have a country where things are looked at in a Trump perspective, America first. So Uganda first. Uganda first. We have over 50,000 Ugandans thriving in South Sudan, business-wise.
George, does Uganda first to you look like diverting money meant for the benefits of Ugandans into military activity in South Sudan?
For the benefit of Ugandans, yes.
The fewer Ugandans went out to that.
Not the fewer Ugandans. They mentioned stats at the beginning of the show. We get $1.5 billion from South Sudan. We want $40 billion. Actually, we want $39.1 billion for the deployment in South Sudan. Opportunity cost.
I think, Ginyera, it's quite problematic for you to say you're not going to discuss it as an East African matter. You're only going to limit it to what Uganda, how it affects Uganda. And you see South Sudan as a member of the EAC, Uganda as one of the pioneers of the EAC, it has a direct implication on how we also relate with other countries bilaterally. If you have mistrust existing within other border countries, then you likely do not get that money. And I think we only make $200 million a year as the statistics of 2024 from South Sudan.
No, that's something I think which is only made in that $200 million is quite small. It's quite small. From a big entity like South Sudan, it's quite small. I think you should recheck.
More to that. I'm lucky that you people understand these things better than I do. And so I am your student here. But when you talk of what statistics or figures did you say of Ugandans that are in South Sudan?
Over 50,000.
Have you as well made research of how many South Sudanans are in Uganda?
Oh, they're quite a number. Though I may not have very right.
Do you understand that we could as well have that trade if all South Sudanese went to South Sudan and Ugandans came back, and the equation would still be balanced? Because you cannot argue, for example, that if all the Ugandans returned, we would have a population increase beyond the resources, because we also have South Sudanese. Meaning that if they're in positions of service and in work in labor, we can as well have our Ugandans back and the South Sudanese back, and the equation will still. So I want you to distance yourself from the argument of the Ugandans in South Sudan. For me, that doesn't.
It's not a justification.
It is not a justification. Because if your point was that we only have Ugandans and no South Sudanese in Uganda, then it would be valid. We would be worried that if they chased them today, for example, where would they go? But if we just did a swap, balance the equation, full stop.
But
Front another argument.
No, do I have the latitude to respond?
Front another argument.
You see, Kwesiga, and I think throughout the discussion, from what we have shared, the protracted debate that we have had, I don't think at any one time, the what I mentioned about the Ugandans there is in our abnormal circumstances as we're operating right now. You have a war in South Sudan, so I don't think a swap, it can't be a wish that you can have now.
Hypothetically.
Oh, hypothetically. So we discuss.
He has just given me that.
Because I'm discussing facts.
So
I'm discussing
once
facts.
again,
In Uganda, they say "Echiri ku ground." That is what I'm discussing. I'm not having wishes in my mind.
If I were to ask you,
Yes.
you distance yourself from making an argument that has anything to do with the concept of East Africa. But do you also understand that the fact that we have Ugandans in South Sudan and South Sudanese in Uganda, that alone is a concept of East Africa? Because then that communicates to labor mobility.
Yeah, but the Ugandans in South Sudan were there even before South Sudan joined EAC.
Has the status quo been the same from then to today, or has it been even much easier?
People moving? No, I think the mobility was there even before. It was as good as it was before.
Proceed.
I think me, I'm done. I don't know who was won.
It's very funny.
Yes.
This is an issue I think, George. Personally, I'm trying to put myself in like a different person's shoe and try to understand your argument in regards to
but Onen, what have I said that is out
No,
of?
Drake.
What have I said?
I could tell you the very many problematic things you've said since we began this show. One, you said it is okay for UPDF to be deployed whenever and whenever Salva Kiir says we need this,
Just
you're
fine.
likely going to deploy it. You agreed and said that we shouldn't have that debate because it has happened before, so it's precedent.
I don't know. No, Denise, I wouldn't want me to be misquoted. Yes, maybe that's the reason for why people are not comprehending what I'm saying. I was giving context to what Onen said. I didn't say that this has happened. No, it's okay for this to happen because it already happened before. I was only replying to Onen and told him, oh, by the way, it also even happened in what?
But it is okay for us to deploy them, right?
Yeah, it is in the current circumstances. Yes, it
Which
is.
current
But I didn't give
circumstances?
I didn't give the past
There's a
happenings.
conflict that you are responding to.
Yes, there's an
That's a current
emergency.
circumstance.
and in a nutshell, it has no implications on EAC
On EAC.
relations.
You know,
The legality of East African
now
community.
I've gotten now the root cause of the misunderstanding. When I said, and I categorically said, that me as Ginyera Orochi, in my opinion, I wouldn't want to look at this in the EAC perspective because
Why?
For the reasons I gave. I don't know that people have been
Because
following.
Uganda is the most affected, yeah?
Yes, that's what I said. But
Uganda is
that
part
then
of the
didn't
EAC.
relegate,
Yeah.
or I didn't say that the discussion of looking at it in EAC is not relevant. Did I mention that?
But you realize there are spillover effects
Already on the East
on
African
the East
community.
African community
Because there
itself.
are already tensions. Because if Kenya is against the idea of us deploying,
Rwanda,
in-
Tanzania.
Rwanda is against the same. Ethiopia publicly also went ahead and commented. Where does that leave the picture of Uganda alone on the international scene? It will-
Because when I was sitting back as you're asking the question, I was asking myself. There was a resettlement plan of persons in Katanga. So the students in Makerere, I think, would be best benefiting if at all people in Katanga, because there's a lot of insecurity in that place. So how then would the opinions of a person in Gulu about the affairs of Katanga and Makerere, how then would they matter?
George,
That's what I'm
clearly
trying to
also
ask.
problematic.
Yes.
I disassociate
Now,
with
allow me to intervene on his behalf
Yes.
and only make this statement. That it is true that sometimes we make arguments and we don't know where they lead. But when you reach a point and you hit an impediment,
end.
sometimes you have to either to end or to get back. And so I would sympathize and say that the debate is this stuff on his end because he seems to contradict. And so
In which way,
I think
Kwesiga?
that we proceed and have a discussion moving other than disturbing him further.
But then that you need to tell in which way have I contradicted myself?
You seem to be against the concept of East Africa.
Definitely, and that's what I've said.
Your argument clearly is for the concept of East Africa.
How, Kwesiga? How? Show me how.
Okay, George. This is
No. I want Kwesiga to show me how. How I'm contradicting myself. Yes.
Now, South Sudan is an East African.
Till what? Last year was it? Last year or 2 years back?
It was.
When was South Sudan adopted? 2 years? 1 year?
2023.
Is it, isn't it?
It is.
Uganda is. And your worry, number one, is that we have a lot to lose if things go
South.
south in South Sudan. And we are
Like
we
it
are
were
neighbors.
before South Sudan.
And you
joined the
also
EAC.
agreed that equally other countries have something to lose.
But
The
not as much
neighbors,
as
but
Uganda.
especially Uganda. And for me, you wouldn't detach that argument from the concept of East Africa.
No, but Kwesiga, still I mentioned in what I said that people, goods and persons were even moving before South Sudan joined the EAC community. Even if this war were there before the EAC, before South Sudan
But you know
joined.
why the EAC
No, but
actually welcomed South
Kwesiga,
Sudan?
then have I
It's
contradicted
because-
myself? I don't know.
Alright,
Have I contradicted myself?
Okay, so George, I just want to paint this. I think, in my opinion, your entire argumentation centers on one thing: economics, trade.
We have a lot to lose, yes.
Entirely
Even socially, you should go to
Trade.
Kirandong and
We
No,
have
no,
a
it's
lot to lose
alright.
by the deployment or failure too.
no, by failure to deploy.
by failure to deploy, because entirely we get a lot of money through trade in South Sudan. Now look at it from this perspective. The UPDF through Oboth came in and then are requesting for a supplementary budget to fund this war.
39.1 billion.
You have the figures right. You have, let's just look at the issues in Uganda. You have young people, a majority of your population, 77% were largely unemployed. George, I don't want to take this personal. We have had conversations about employment.
Definitely.
We have had conversations about employment.
Yes.
If you and me, in such a situation and in such a forum, can have that conversation about employment, imagine that person who doesn't have that capacity to have a conversation about employment. What chance do they have to get employed? Close to zero. And the government is diverting funds that will possibly help create employment opportunities for young people. That aside, how many mothers are dying daily because of, one, there are no doctors in the hospital? Maternal health is at its worst almost.
And noting more to that, understanding that this is not an investment, so you have no ROI, you have no return on investment. That even if you achieved the peace, but you've lost that and you might never regain it. Noting that, like we said behind the cameras, that we are almost at the apex
Of not borrowing again.
of not borrowing anymore. And we are still allocating this huge sum of money to a venture that has no payback on our end.
Shall we
I understand you might want to argue from the point of then our economics, if we achieved the peace, would still go on.
But do you agree with
Are
that?
you even? I do agree, but not from the aspect of the deployment. But
So I don't know. I don't know now.
Anyway, because it looks like George has entirely refused to understand.
No, okay.
No,
Onen.
but we totally respect your worldview.
Maybe other panelists should take it on.
Emmanuel, let's just pick your thoughts on the relationship. This, no, like the effects this has on the relationship of EAC. Yeah.
now, minus going into entering new effects. Let's speak to one that we've been speaking to, and that is something that goes to affect our budget. We understand that the deployment comes with a budget allocation to it. Keep in mind that we do not know how long we are going to be there, meaning that the sum that has been allocated might even be doubled depending on the need. Because of the outcome and how long it might take to have the security and the peace, that we have no control over, and so we don't know. Meaning that we might even have more resources allocated. That's expenditure number one. Two, these are intertwined. The aspect of refugee, of displacement of people. That then we might have people running away through the process of trying to restore the peace, because we understand these are sort of military fronts. And so this, of course, has an element of people having to flee, to run away, meaning that there is going to be influx of refugees to neighboring countries, us, Uganda being one of them. Meaning that when that happens, we equally are going to have another huge budget allocated to cater for them. So these are two sorts of expenditures, they are two in one. Still, on the basis of the economics, we understand that our countries, to some degree, thrive on the element of tourism. If there is anything that does not relate with insecurity, something to do with tourism, this conflict, I should call it, in South Sudan, affects tourism as an industry in the countries neighboring it. Later alone Uganda, but even the other countries. These people that come and that are the biggest number that we have from the European countries and whatnot coming to East Africa, respect peace so much that the mere mention of a conflict in South Sudan is enough for us to be affected, meaning that we are losing on two fronts of expenditure and failure to earn. And for me, I would want to end my arguments there. I understand that these people have so many other factors that they are going to come to later on, our forces being lost in the South Sudan, in the conflict. Those are, but for me, on the economic basis. And that's the point he's been making. Although for him, he's in support, he seems to suggest that when we deploy, we are going to earn more. But for me, I'm saying that we have a lot to lose by the deployment. For me, let that be my only effect. The others are not going to do them.
Isaac, do you hold the same worldview?
Well,
Because you earlier on you were opining with joint submissions.
Yes,
my
confessed.
stance hasn't really changed.
Yeah.
And when you look at the previous speaker, he agrees that once there is an existing conflict, we are losing. Is that true?
Yeah, it does.
Right? On the economic side. And he also agrees that once we deploy, we're also
Losing.
That's one person.
No. Well, he said when we deploy,
Mm.
we have a lot more to lose. Yes, right?
Yes,
And again, he said when there is an existing conflict, it affects the tourism.
Yes.
Of course, Uganda is a neighboring state. Now, this is going to be sweet. Why? The fact that we have seen how much we benefit when the conflict is not there as a state necessitates the government. For me, I'm not concerned. I'm not saying that the argument of us failing to respect our internal procedures as a country, you get, is good. No. I said, and I have heard, that it was wrong to make that decision. But it was right, the fact that we are responding to a conflict. On the parliamentary procedures and the passing, I totally disagree that, of course, we should have followed procedure. But the fact that there is a conflict, then we were justified in doing what? In responding. Looking at all, like these people have already argued, what we are going to lose. Uganda is the beneficiary. If the conflict is not there, we benefit. Once the conflict is there, then how can we keep quiet? But then I want to speak something into the East African community. The East African community has been a huge question. We have been here, we have debated it before. Certainly, I think we misunderstand George's submission when he says that he doesn't want to look at it in the East African perspective. I would associate with that submission in two angles. One of which he has already even painted a picture for, that the fact that Uganda's bilateral relationship with South Sudan is one of the largest consumers of our goods than any other East African country, which gives us justification to maintain peace. It's not that we want to spend this money, or we are overlooking any other allocations within the country. But the fact that we already have a population there, they are also Ugandans, and we must stand in for them. Yeah. The second thing is that in as much as we might paint an argument for the East African community, I gave a history of this country from 1954 until 2025. The question would have been, what has been East Africa's response to these conflicts that have been in South Sudan? It is true that Kenya is disassociating with itself and has always condemned, but we helped Kenya when it was bombed. We went there, didn't we? You agree? Was it Westgate Mall? We were there. You get? We responded. So it is ironic, and I think when you say that Uganda shouldn't intervene, I really feel like we are not understanding the weight of this question. The procedural question, I said I am not into it, but the fact that Uganda and its history, we are a landlocked country. We must accept that. That means that we thrive on other people. When Kenya decides to close its borders to Uganda or any other country, we are held tight. So that means that by all means, the peace of any other African, any other neighbor to Uganda is paramount, not just one. You get? The East African community, I agree, and I say we should have the East African community, but it should not just speak, it should act. you see, if the East African community, if there was a meeting to respond to that conflict, I don't think Uganda would have refused it. Even people are talking today, okay, yes, we deployed. What are other East African members doing? Or the East African, has there been any session to call for a response to that? African Union, see what happened in Libya. African Union was existing, wasn't it? It was existing. No one, yes, people spoke. We agree that African Union, it can do this, should be this, should be this. There is procedure, multilateral, whatever intervention. Yes, it is true. But then why doesn't it act? If African Union today said that maybe let's have a session to respond to South Sudanese conflict, I don't think UPDF would have overstepped that. But the fact that there is no one willing, people are only talking, there is no one willing to act and stand in, that is why.
There's a rationale behind why most of these international bodies are not willing to militarily intervene in the issue of South Sudan. But Denise can respond.
Exactly what you said. I think you can't ignore still the paradigm in which South Sudan exists.
It's a very complex issue.
It's a complex issue that has continuously had historical issues. When you look at the ethnic tensions, the rivalries that have continuously exist, and the formation of South Sudan itself and how it came about, these are very complex issues that do not require combat, that do not require guns, that do not require a military. They're things that require negotiation. And I think it's problematic for you to say, point out that Kenya, when Kenya came, we intervened. That's Al-Shabaab, for heaven's sake.
No.
It's not an entire ethnic group against the other ethnic group, or it's not a particular religious grouping against the other. Those are rebels, and there it's justified for you to use any combat missions
But
or
even
to
the
deploy
White
forces.
Army are
No.
rebels.
The White Army, you know where it's stemming from? It's stemming from the fact that you have ethnic tensions, you have rivalries existing between the
These are
Nuer and
different
the
types of
Dinka.
conflicts.
It's a different type of conflict. You're escalating an ethnic civil war.
Maybe Denise, in 1 second.
No,
During
no,
the break, you
Ginyera.
mentioned that negotiations have
No,
happened.
no.
Since
I'm coming to
2011,
that.
they
There's
have been
nothing.
happening.
No, I'm coming to that. And do you know why now the possibility of UPDF escalating them is even higher? Because Uganda, Museveni himself has a historical tie to Riek Machar, who is the what? Who is a Dinka. And continuously when you go into
Salva
that,
Kiir.
Salva Kiir, who is a Dinka, and you've continuously had it escalate because you do not have a neutral. For you to go into a country and be able to mediate, you must show that you're neutral. UPDF itself just goes, you're going
They
to
pick
do a
a
mission,
side.
they pick a side and say we're going, and this has happened since 2018 and 2025. You know the reason as to why IGAD was almost successful into this and the East African community? It's because they get the two rivalry groups and sit down with them and say you're going to be vice president, you're going to be president.
Then
This
what
is how we're
happened?
going, this is how we're going to solve the issue. But then when it comes to power balance, to an extent that some ethnic groups feel marginalized, you do not go with guns to make them feel they are accepted or to make them do that. Kwesiga made a very valid point, and I think most of you ignored it. UPDF, wherever it has been deployed, how successful has it been? And I don't want you to tell me, oh, it has not been worse, or Somaliland. The metrics on how you determine how an army or a deployment has been successful are there. Is the war going to stop? But you're calling yourselves peacekeeping when you're worsening the situation. And now we are going to talk about what all of you talked about, the budget outstretch of what you're going to sustain the UPDF in. Uganda, before they deployed UPDF, they told it to go to Mali. It rejected it and said that we cannot afford that budget to send peacekeeping forces to Mali. So what changed when it came to DRC? Really, when it came to South Sudan? I think
So you don't know what changed between Mali and South
I
Sudan.
don't know.
Between Mali and South Sudan.
I don't know
You
really
know where
what
Mali
changed.
Really?
No,
It is
no,
no.
no.
No, it is.
Okay, I know
The
that.
neighbors-
The arguments both of you are thinking about is not what.
No. I don't
What
mean
do you
attack.
mean? What do you mean?
One
What
day.
is-
Let's
I
have
just
the-
mean, I mean in the close proximity of how we feel. It's almost the same context, really, right? If we are showing the stance,
Yeah.
we have been in
They are
Guinea-Bissau.
very
really.
different.
It is really, but we have been in Chad. For heaven's sake, Chad is even further than Mali.
Other than Mali.
Exactly. But I mean, this is close proximity to us and all those things you're
Excuse me.
thinking about. But where did we suddenly now get a budget to go into South Sudan? That's where I'm coming from. I'm not saying that the war doesn't affect us more than how it affects maybe Mali's neighboring countries. But I'm saying that the budget, how does it play into us getting all that budget? When you see, this is very problematic, George. Really, I would need you. You see, in 2018,
Negotiate.
okay, I'm
Wants to
negotiating.
deploy.
Between 2016 and 2018, when you were having UPDF being deployed still, you had teachers striking, you had people going for walk to work, you had all these issues happening domestically, and you choose to deploy UPDF to support it, even when all the other countries are against you, or even when you're not looking as the neutral mediator. I don't think you should come from a point where you say, oh, we are going to solve these issues. These issues stem from a fact that South Sudan as a country needs to align itself. You need a mediator that is going to ensure not guns, not combat, not peacekeeping missions like what you're trying to do as Uganda.
George.
Now closing remarks, I guess. Because I think everything has been said.
Looks like you.
And sides have not changed. Sure.
Yes.
I think thank you very much for the opportunity, Onen, and to Civic Space, surely. It has been a very insightful debate. I think from all sides, surely, from all sides. But the bare minimum is, and it's something that I mentioned, maybe it wasn't taken with a lot of importance, is that when the drug war in the US became overly protracted, the US created a drug agency, the DEA. And I think also army affiliates to that effect that went into Mexico, went into Panama, regardless of what has been said here. So the DEA went into these to tackle the problem directly, ground in Mexico, in Panama, in El Salvador. And these are some of the reasons why today the drug war is the way it is. Even the problem of immigration and all this, these are issues that cannot be handled. Because Denise is saying you want to go there with guns, but these are trades. But people are actually fighting with guns.
Problems are not drugs.
No, and I'm giving an example.
Context,
Yeah, it's just context, Denise.
But
it's just
your context is so
Should
perfect.
fit
No,
because it's not far-fetched, Onen.
Okay.
I don't know. Our moderator is biased.
Also, I don't know. I don't understand it.
biased.
But that was a joke. That was a joke. It's not because these are still even these are fights with guns. Yeah, definitely.
Okay,
So what I was trying to say is that the negotiations have happened. The mediators Denise is talking about have been there. IGAD has been there. These are things that have been happening since 2011, but the war is still going on. So what is the problem? What is the problem?
So guns can solve the problem.
Definitely. A military solution. Definitely.
Right.
I like that we have that on record.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it is on record.
So
And
people-
the Mali issue is on record too.
Isaac.
Okay. Thank you, our dear listeners. Mr. Nick, that's been an insightful discussion. Definitely, I would say that as we progress as a country, of course, we must put issues that affect the country at heart. And of course, I would also want a very peaceful Uganda, a very strong economy where I don't have to worry about my medical bills and whatever. We have issues, but of course, at the same time, even in as much as we run short of these, what we dream of, the fact that our neighbors are in a worse position, it is only necessary that we come into. I think the summary of this debate is the methodology. Yeah, the methodology that is being used. Yes, at the end of the day, we all agree with the results. We want better results, positive results, but how do we achieve the results? And I think maybe that's where we draw the line. I don't say that for me any methodology that works. If it is a negotiation, I wanted to even give a list of agreements that have happened before from the time of President Jafar Niemel. Those agreements have been there, but they were overnight trashed. You get? So it is not that these methodologies, negotiation has not been ongoing. But where it comes now to where people are picking guns, you respond to a gun with a gun. You get? Where people are dying, then it is only necessary that but where there is chance, if these two opposing parties decided to come together and negotiate, if they feel like we had around 3 decades from 55 to around 1980 when tensions again came in because of the oil. If we can have an agreement and still share power, Uganda is okay. Uganda, it's not like we have an idle army that we want to send everywhere. And no, it's not like that. We only respond to a crisis and, of course, to protect one, the interests of the country, and, of course, the citizens of Uganda that are in South Sudan. Yes, thank you.
Emmanuel.
Thank you so much, Drake. I'm so pleased to have had the privilege of deliberating on such a national, later on a regional matter of concern together with you, my fellow panelists. It's been such a pleasure, and thank you so much, Drake, for hosting us. But I'd want to think that away from the debate, literally, I think we do agree in principle. Because our point is one, we are all seeking for peace. Only that we are candidates, cadres of different mechanisms. But the principle is one, our target is one, is to achieve peace. What differs is our modus operandi. How do we achieve the peace? That's why we define. That's what brings this discussion up. But all said and done, a conflict in a neighboring country is the equivalent of having a neighbor that has epilepsy. I believe if I had that disease, most of you wouldn't be comfortable, even when I'm sober like I am now. You would be worried what might happen in the next minute. I would just shake my leg and you see Denise running, thinking that I am falling. So definitely we cannot be stable, we cannot have peace of mind as citizens of Uganda or Kenya or Tanzania if we have a neighbor that is at conflict or at war, because we suffer the consequences. And so we wouldn't want to see this happening. Although I and the rest of you per now do not have so much to put to table, but only to, in my opinion, is to call upon those that have the opportunity to devise means. Right now, I wouldn't say to call for negotiation because maybe their opinion could be different, but it would be very important that we have peace in the region. Only then can we be able to live in harmony and to prosper as countries at individual level, but also East Africa as a level. With that said, I'm glad to have been invited. Thank you for inviting me, the crew, and the rest of the panelists. It's been nice having you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Denise.
All right. Thank you so much, Drake, for having me. And I'm so glad and so humbled to have been on this panel with these different cadres in their different abilities. Really, it's always challenging knowing them and having them. But also one thing I would just want to conclude by saying is that you see, whatever the UPDF, even when it tries to keep peace out there, I think what they're doing in South Sudan deviates from the traditional peacekeeping. It deviates from the legalities of different treaties. And I think we should look for other amends, because it's the picture we paint out there, the optics that we're trying so much to preserve that shows what actually happens internally or domestically. But then also as a country, we need to align our priorities differently. I think we need to choose a hustle. Is it protecting our own people and not protecting the economy of other countries, really? Yeah.
Thank you. It's been a very interesting conversation. And at some point, I was inclined to believe George. At some point, I was inclined to be.
You're biased.
Don't even go there.
Honestly, when you listen to the arguments of Isaac and George, it's compelling. You listen to Emmanuel and Denise, all compelling arguments. But definitely, it's been a very wonderful conversation. And I think it comes down to one thing, as you rightly said, the methods or the methodologies that are supposed to be employed by the various actors that are involved is what will lead us to the one result that we all want, peace. And at this point, I'll give my opinion. And my opinion would be to negotiate, because lives, you just can't kill people.
Sure.
Yeah, irrespective of whether it's a rebel or is on the other side. At the end of the day, we are all human beings and we need to treasure life. So whichever chance that there is to preserve and keep life, I would take that option, and that option would be negotiation. And the warmongers, my brother.
He said we should kill.
In my opinion, I'd say we go for negotiation and that would be a much better option for a young state like South Sudan and a state that is growing. But nonetheless, thank you very much, Isaac. Thank you very much, Emmanuel. Thank you very much, Denise. And thank you very much, George, for this very interesting conversation. That maybe years from now, we shall look back and look at our
Young submissions.
our young submissions, and we shall say maybe
I could have done
Double
I
better.
could have done better. But nonetheless, thank you very much to the crew, Brittany, Al, and all the team at Skia, Civic Space TV. Thank you very much. And Center for Constitutional Governance for making this possible. And to you, our dear esteemed viewers, for always following and catching up on the inter-university debates. See you next week, same time, same place. Bye-bye.